So my name is Bramley Jones. I've Android developer for about over 7 years, and I attended Google I/O last year and this year, along with several others from the Melbourne GDG meetup. So at I/O there was these guys. They're called the Fungineers. They handed out ice cream and slid down a van. There was augmented reality map app around the campus to explore all the different areas at the event. There was roller skating. There was the flaming lips for the concert. The front man arrived inside a balloon. And then there were some more balloons. But I don't have time to talk about that. Instead, declarative UI and reactive state management, i.e. Flutter and Swift UI. So has anyone heard of or used Flutter? Yeah, okay, wow, cool. For those that don't know, Flutter is a cross-platform declarative UI and framework for iOS and Android. It runs natively at 120 FPS using direct rendering to the OpenGL or Vulkan graphics pipeline, enabling it to be very high performant. It's available right now in production. It's up to version 1.5. At I/O this year, Google announced Flutter for Web in technical preview. Google also announced Jetpack Compose for Android using Kotlin in technical preview, and Swift UI. So here's a brief introduction to Flutter. So it's very small, but it's basically you have one build method. The build method returns your entire widget tree. So in this case, you have an app bar which has a text, the Flutter demo homepage. You have the body text with a center-aligned button clicked that many times, and then underneath that, a floating action button with a callback when it's pressed increment counter. Increment counter is up here, and it just increments a local variable called counter inside a function called setState. Whenever setState is called, it instructs the framework to re-render the entire UI. So the entire screen, depending on at what level you've called setState, from everywhere from there down is re-rendered every time that happens. And Flutter is fast enough for that to happen very rapidly. Yeah, there's 120 FPS. Also in this video, you can see there, of course, changing the code live and pressing this hot reload button, which updates the code. You can update the text or the functionality, and it's immediately running. This is in the iPhone simulator, but of course on an Android device as well. And it is this fast, so it's actually a revelation. I'm not sure exactly how that will compare to the Swift UI's preview. It seems like the preview in Swift UI is only for those particular widgets. It's different to running your entire app. In Flutter's case, it's your entire app that's running, and you can hot reload the entire state of your app on whatever page that you're on. It's not just for a particular widget. So it seems like that's different. If you want to know more about Flutter, there's the combined CocoaHeads, GDG Melbourne, and Flutter Hack Nights, and the next one's next Wednesday. There's also Flutter Melbourne is doing a study jam in July, to be advised, which will be one night of just studying Flutter. And there's a new channel in the CocoaHeads Slack. So Jetpack Compose, which is a similar framework but only for Android using Kotlin. This was, Google is developing this in the open source. It looks like they've been working on it for about a year so far, but there's still not a huge amount of information on it. It's very bare, especially when you compare the documentation here to what Apple has produced. It's still very much a work in progress, but hopefully the same team that did Flutter, Google has got working on Jetpack Compose. So there are areas that are quite similar between Flutter and Compose. And they're Swift UI. So I used to love the separation of UI and code. I used to think it's great in Android you would have XML layouts where you just write out your layouts and you can have different layouts for different device sizes. And then in Java you would wire up the code, very, very similar to what Audrey demoed for in the interface builder. A very similar approach for Android. I thought that was great. Then I ported one of my side projects to Flutter, and I have seen the light. Declarative UI is, it eliminates so many different classes of bugs, entire classes of bugs. So you don't have to worry about updating different parts of your UI at different times based on different events. Instead, you just declare that your UI is a function of your state. And you say, this is my UI, here it is, and because Flutter is performant enough to render the entire thing whenever things change, you don't have to worry about trying to update different parts at different times. It also means significantly reduced code. And the hot reload button is again a step shift in development, because instead of having to code and then deploy and wait and install and a minute or two later and you've forgotten what you're doing, instead the app is your UI preview. You don't need a UI preview, you don't need a layout editor, because you do it all in the actual application that's running in the simulator or on your actual device. So Google has seen how powerful this is, and they've added it to Android with the Flutter team's help. It's excellent that Apple is doing the same thing. And I wonder that if this stuff wasn't announced for Android and for iOS this year, would even more people be taking up Flutter? All of this makes our lives a lot easier. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for? Yeah.
So I do some Android dev as well, and I shouldn't say that too loudly here. But I'm interested in your view on Jetpack and Pose versus Flutter. I mean, would I be right in saying that you're more interested in Flutter than Jetpack, or is that just because it's been around a bit longer, or is Jetpack not as capable at the moment, being fairly new?
It's not as capable at the moment. To use it, it's only a technical preview at the moment, so you actually need to compile your own version of Android Studio, and it only works on Mac. It's not compatible with Windows. So I haven't used it. Yeah, it's great. It's definitely great that they're doing it, and I'm still going to be an Android developer. But if they hadn't done it, I would very much, if they hadn't done it, I'd probably very much prefer to be a Flutter developer in the near future.
One question I had was, so everyone on the Android side is moving to Kotlin, but Flutter uses Dart, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was just interested, how do you compare those two languages? How does Kotlin versus Dart?
Dart's actually very similar to Java, except with fewer of the annoying parts of Java. Yeah, it is fairly similar to Kotlin, Java. Like classes, curly braces, but without access modifiers and automatic getters and setters, the same as Kotlin. So they're all relatively similar, and I think lambdas in Dart are relatively similar to lambdas in Kotlin. I actually converted a Java Android project to Flutter, and a significant amounts of business logic were literally copy and paste, which was actually really awesome. And then for stuff that wasn't, it was just a matter of a regular expression to remove the access modifiers because there's no public or private keywords. But other than that, very similar.
Any more questions? You want a sec?
So Dart doesn't use any of the platform native controls. Oh, sorry, not Dart. Flutter doesn't use any of the platform native controls. It re-renders them all itself in OpenGL.
Yeah.
How do you think those look? I mean, what's the sort of overall effect? Does it feel 100% native, or does it feel more like a cross-platform app?
It definitely feels native, which is a surprising thing. It does. Tried it out. It seems awesome. You can use native views. So, for example, Google Maps, there's no Flutter version. There's a Flutter. you can use Google Maps in Flutter, but it's still rendered using the platform Google Maps. So you can embed platform views in any part of your UI, and you can draw on top of them in Flutter as well. So it's the best of all worlds. Which, yeah, it is though. I've tried it. It is.
Good talk, thanks. Sorry in advance for this question. At WWDC 2020, when we get Swift UI for Android, are you going to be a Swift dev from then on, do you think? Sorry, that's a total troll question. You don't need to answer that.
So I have actually written Swift code for the first time, just like a few weeks ago, just because I was porting my app. The whole reason why I took up Flutter was that I could port one of my apps to iOS without needing to learn Objective-C or Interface Builder or any of that, because that was a fairly steep learning curve for what I wanted to do. And also because I didn't actually own a MacBook. So I did all my development on my PC. But yeah, I have written some Swift code for the native components, like using the hardware accelerometers and sensors and stuff, which I needed to do. But otherwise, yeah. So it was fine. I survived. It was good.
Any more questions, guys? No, thank you very much.